Lucía, ¿cómo estás? How are you?
Bien, ¿y usted?
Muy bien, gracias. Pasa. Bien. ¿Cómo vas?
I am.
Here you are.
Here I am.
¿Cómo vas con
Pues...
tu restricción?
Ay. No, pues es que vi lo que yo tengo de Literature Review y estaba viendo los documentos que usé
Okay.
para ver con...
Alright, let me look here. Have you added anything yet to your Google Drive document? Any literature review that you had last semester?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay.
No,
Take a look here. Okay, so just let's review your research problem here. So I wish to learn about giving instructions because I want to find out how teachers promote students' better understanding of English instruction in order to understand teachers' use of techniques when giving instructions so that teachers might improve giving instructions. Okay, so your literature review from last semester was focused a lot on giving instructions?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you talk some about L1, L2 or not really? I mean, what are some of the main concepts from your literature review, just to kind of get an idea about that?
It was... For example, the use of language, how teachers make use of language when giving instructions, and...
So some examples, can you recall some examples or techniques or...
Mm-hmm. For example, the styles and the way the teachers controls his attitude towards
And do you have any primary research articles handy that we can, or that you've reviewed that you can talk about, maybe that might give you some ideas about what you can do in your own research? Did you find anything that was helpful as far as maybe instruments or certain theoretical concepts? Again, I'm thinking about did you discuss in your literature review certain techniques or the use of repetition? I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, it was different things, teacher way of giving instructions, the speech, the maybe what they do. I mean, regarding body movements or.
Okay. So some might have been nonverbal communication.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, for example, I found something that the instructions can be given verbally, dictics, embodied demonstrations, that is nonverbal physical manipulations and all that.
Okay.
For example, the use of eye contact and some little about student response towards it. I don't know.
Okay. So what we need to look at here is I think we still need to look more specifically at the conceptual question. And what you have now is how teachers promote students, how giving instructions can promote or help students better understand the instructions. Then for that, to focus on that, we would have to focus on measuring what they understood and what they didn't understand. So that's one way of doing it. I'm thinking about what you're going to measure if we look at step 2, because really everything here, all the 4 steps are kind of integrated. So you have here, I wish to examine teachers' behaviors when giving instructions. So,
Well, I want to
Yeah.
do like more directly to teachers. Like, what do they do when giving instructions?
okay, so part of it is language. So do you want to measure the use of L1, L2?
No, it's like more like English.
Just speaking English, okay?
Mhm.
So what are you thinking about examining specifically? So talking about the behaviors, um, what you plan on observing. Do you want to observe like the language that they use? Like, for example, do they tend to slow down, like pace? You could measure that, right? I'm thinking everything that we have that we're going to examine or that you decide that you want to examine, you have to ask yourself, how will I measure it? And you can measure pace because you can measure how the teacher talks, like how many words per minute does this teacher talk when she or he is not giving instructions versus how many words per minute he or she gives per minute for when he or she is giving instructions. So that's one thing. What else? What else could you examine? You
The
could
non-verbal language during instructions.
Okay, so you could observe nonverbal. So maybe the use like gestures. What gestures could the teacher use? Adelante. Adelante. Hola.
Disculpe, ¿está ocupado?
Sí.
Vengo más tarde si quiere.
Ok. Sí, tengo clase hasta la 1 hoy.
Entonces-
Entonces voy a estar aquí entre como a la... Tengo un asunto como regreso como a la 1:30, más o menos.
Ok, yo...
Sí, hasta las 3.
Gracias.
Sí, ok, de nada. So, gestures, hand movements, facial expressions.
So I have to focus like in one specifically?
Not
or-
necessarily one, but you don't want to focus on too many things. So the idea is to choose how many that you think that you can measure and include in this
Okay.
analysis. So I would say you want to decide on a few of these. Now,
Uh-huh.
some of these in fact, all of them need to come from the literature review. So try to also think about what you've already talked about in the literature review. So if you talked about gestures, then that might be something that you can include. I don't know if you talked about pace but that would be another thing. Even the use of repetition,
Yeah.
using thinking about like a discourse from our discourse analysis class, we talked about the use of like synonyms, so maybe they said it a different way, but the same thing, but with different words, using synonyms, even though it's all in English.
Okay, for example, if I want to focus on that, I would need to like do what we did in this course analysis, like
Pretty
to,
much, do a
like,
transcription.
transcription
Right,
about
exactly. And most everyone is going to be doing a transcription of some sort, depending on what they're analyzing. But yes, you would record the class. It could be a videotape. In fact, you would probably want to try to do a videotape if you're going to include gestures. That way you have a visual element. You can see what they're doing, and you can also then use that video to transcribe. So you'd be writing it out or typing it out, and then doing an analysis, looking at you would code the information and come up with categories and things. So these topics that I think that when you talked about in discourse analysis, I think a lot of that could also apply in this case, looking at how the teacher's using language, this case English, to give instructions, and if the teacher is alternating the
alternative.
it could be alternating in the sense of pace, but even if the idea is to see how they're using language, or he's using language to give instructions. So now the thing to think about is, since you aren't going to talk about English and Spanish, and you're not going to mention English and Spanish in your literature review, you need to find teachers who are only giving, to the best of your knowledge, only giving classes or instructions in English. Because if they start talking in Spanish, then that part you just won't even include. I mean, you'll say, they spoke Spanish, but you won't analyze it. You won't include it really in your analysis.
Mhm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But, well, the thing is that because I found that some teachers don't like to use Spanish, they want to keep using English for students to understand instructions or anything.
Right. So you just want to focus on those teachers.
Mhm.
What else? Anything else that comes to mind as far as what to examine?
No, well, I was thinking, well, basically right here, well, verbal and non-verbal language.
Okay.
But taking into account only English.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think these are some possibilities here, and I think this is manageable. I don't think it's too much. But you will, you need to kind of articulate that. Think about exactly how you're going to measure that. So going back to our conceptual question. I wish to learn more about giving instructions in a target language, but it could be, because I want to find out how teachers use verbal and nonverbal communication in order for students to understand. So here, in order to understand how students understand, or how they even, I guess how they understand, or
how they react.
Could be how they react. Yeah, could be how they react or how they respond. So if they say, you have to ask yourself, do you want to see how they actually respond, that is, talk and speak in class? Or how do they feel? But how do they feel is kind of...
It's kind of difficult, but I have to ask them.
I think about how they would react. I like that one, like how they respond in class. Like how would... but you're focusing, I think, more on the language than on certain behaviors, because you're basically just seeing how they answer back. Like, do they not answer? If they do answer, do they answer in Spanish? Because you could also look, even though you're not focusing on English and Spanish, if the student responds in Spanish, that is part of how they respond. So that could be part of, and then you can see, okay, does the teacher then respond back in English, and then how does the teacher respond? So you might even, I think that would be interesting. Now, I guess I'm trying to think of all the possible scenarios. If the teacher gives these instructions, I guess what you need to find out are teachers who say, I only teach English, and I sometimes have problems with my students not understanding the instructions, or something like that, because you want to find cases where there's the students don't understand, because if you observe all the classes and they always understand, you're not going to get good, a lot of information, right? So you actually want to try to find a scenario, a couple of classes or teachers where there is the teacher can identify, they say, yeah, I have this issue with my students understanding me when I give instructions in English. And you might think about doing some sort of initial survey where you ask these questions. How do you feel about English and the use of English and Spanish? What about giving instructions? Do your students always understand you? And then from those, you hopefully can choose and find a group of teachers. And since you're doing kind of a discourse analysis, you want to limit the number of groups, because it's going to be kind of an in-depth analysis, right? So you could, I would say, you could focus even on one group, one teacher and student group, or maybe 2 or 3, but probably not more than 3. I would rather that you dive deeper into one or two versus having too many and just kind of lightly understanding it, because it's going to be a little bit of work to transcribe and do this. So now you don't have to transcribe the entire class, right? But you will have to analyze the whole class, in that you'll have to listen to it and say, okay, the teacher's giving instructions here, and I don't know, maybe they give instructions, maybe they have to repeat later. I mean, you'll be kind of analyzing it in 2 ways. One is, the actual exchange, that is the moment that the teacher says something, the student says something. And then you might also have to analyze, like, the teacher gives instructions in the first 5 minutes, then they start an activity, then there's some confusion, and the teacher has to come back and give the instructions again, and just see kind of how that looks from like a class standpoint. So just keep that in mind. But I think this is all doable, and I think if we focus on the language used and nonverbal, think of verbal and nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
And then your literature review would focus mainly on that. You know, and you could even focus on, let's see, like recast. Remember when we talked in class about like giving recasts and clarification requests, all those 4 different requests? That might be something to consider in your literature review, because even though we consider that feedback, I mean, we do this in normal conversation, not just English language learning, that we repeat each other, we repeat what we say. If we don't understand each other, we give clarification requests and that type of thing. So you might want to consider that, because you could categorize those and measure, well, how often are they doing recasts, or how often are there clarification requests if they don't understand something in the instructions, and so on. Just think about that to see if there's room in your theory for that.
For the recast, right?
Right. There's let's see, recast. What are them? Can't remember all 4 now, but the 4. Some are clarification, comprehension requests. Recasts, just repetition, direct repetition, repeating,
all that.
kind of echoing what the learner says, and so that might be something that you
maybe can
include in that, in the verbal part. So I'm thinking more of the verbal. The nonverbal is what you probably already have. It was hand gestures and eye movements, eye contact maybe. So, but the main thing is that what you talk about in your theory is what you're actually researching. So in your research, right.
Okay.
So yeah, that's that. Now, one thing too. I'm sorry.
No, yeah.
All right. One other thing I want to mention quickly. Step 3 in the unit of analysis. And you don't have to decide that right now. I mean, I'd like for you to kind of think about what it might be, but understand that it might change later. But the idea with the unit of analysis is to try to figure out what's the level of analysis. So are you focusing on 2 different teachers? The unit of analysis would be a teacher.
Okay.
Or if it's one teacher, within that one teacher, what's the unit of analysis? Is it possibly an exchange? In discourse analysis, we talked about the initiation, response, and follow-up being an exchange. And that language exchange could be a unit. So you are analyzing those units, I see, like in that way. So when you look at hand gestures, the use of recasts or repetition or whatever language that they're using, you can look at it in terms of the exchange, the initiation, response, and follow-up, and see what happens when. So when do teachers use more nonverbal, like gestures with their hands? Is it like in the initiation, or is it when the response occurs, or in the follow-up? Right? And the initiation can be initiated from the teacher, or it could be from the student. So even though you're focusing on one exchange, the initiation could happen either way. It could begin with the teacher, or it could begin with the student, because if the student says something, they could initiate the exchange, so then the teacher would respond, and so on. So I think there's some flexibility there in looking at the unit of analysis, in this case, either the exchange, looking at that level, or even the class level, as we mentioned before, where you say, giving instructions here, and then 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, they do it again, or so. Just think about about that, because you will have to define that eventually as far as what level are you going to be analyzing.
That is the unit of analysis.
That's the unit of analysis, and there's some very general examples here, but the idea is that you are looking at the level. Think of it like the level of analysis. So, and you can always go big. You can always start small and go bigger. So let's say that you look at and analyze at the exchange level. You can always go a little bit broader and say, okay, I looked at it at the exchange level, and I also looked at it at the classroom level. So like the first or the lesson level, where they have they give instructions 10 minutes here, and then half an hour later they give instructions again. You can always go broader, if that makes sense, but you can't go more specific. If you say, I'm only going to analyze the class and say how often they give instructions, you can't. It's harder to go back and try to get more specific into the exchange. So just be thinking about that. We'll talk more about that as we get closer to the data collection and all of that. But but be thinking about it now, because this all plays into what you're going to examine. All right, this is very much related. So if you say, I'm only going to, my unit of analysis is the class, the 50-minute class. And I'm only looking at when they give instructions, okay? Then you're not looking at it from, you're not looking at what you're examining. You wouldn't be examining the exchange, because you're looking, an exchange is just a conversation, and you might have a lot of exchanges in that 10 minutes. So do you look at every little exchange in that 10 minutes? Or you just look at those 10 minutes as kind of looking at non-gestures, and you don't look at it that detail. Think of it as level of detail. Okay, so I don't know if I'm not really explaining it very well, but the idea is the level of analysis, and it's always easier to be more specific and then go broader than you can't go the other way. You can't go the other way around. So. Think about that, and that's something we'll have to determine.
This one I left case study because when I talked to Marister told me that it could be a case study. It was a case study because even though it was focused for one or two teachers, it was a case study. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. If you choose teachers that indicate that there is kind of a problem or an issue with students understanding the instructions.
Okay, so
because that's really what you want to focus on. You're not really, you want to try to avoid teachers or situations where students are understanding the instructions. So that's the only thing, because with the case study, you want to find a case that is different in some way, or that from the quote-unquote either norm or the so that would be my only comment on that, is just to try to find
who is giving
classes that students are not understanding, or at least that it's not going as smoothly as possible. That way you can get good information. You'll be assured that you have a lot of good information, because if there's no problems, they're just going to be talking normally. There won't be hardly any recast. There won't be there may not even be an exchange. They say, okay, teacher, and then they start working and they understand everything. So
or maybe like in the middle.
And then you won't have much information. So you just want to make sure you have a case, you have a situation where you have data.
Okay, so basically it's like looking for teachers that give instructions but that they have issues with it. Will it matter the student's age, or
not really?
Not really? Oh.
I mean, not really in the sense that look at your literature review, right? If you have a literature review that only talks about children giving instructions, then you probably need to focus on children. But it really depends on your literature review. If your literature review is general, talks some about children or adults, I think that's the only thing. If you're talking only about one particular group, in your literature review, you might want to stick to that same group.
Yeah.
If there's a mix, then you
Okay.
pretty much can, I don't think it's a problem to choose whatever age group
Whatever age group.
or whatever level. Thinking again that there's a problem with understanding, right? So, my first thoughts would be probably to focus on lower level students, just because they're more, perhaps, they're probably going to have more problems understanding
Maybe intermediate
instructions.
students that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you get up to the higher level students, maybe they have less problems understanding because they have more advanced. Yeah. So the only thing left here that I'd like to mention, if you do choose two groups, you can choose if you want to do some sort of comparison, but it's not necessary. I mean, if you want to choose one group, you could focus on one teacher, one group, and just focus on that and observe a lot, try to get a lot of information. But if you choose two, then you're probably going to have to do some sort of comparison between the groups. And I think we can decide on that a little bit later as well. Okay. So yeah, I think you're on the right track. I would like to see your literature review though, if you can copy and paste.
And do I
that
copy that in the Google Doc?
Yeah, if you want, just copy and paste the whole thing, and then from there, we'll make comments or changes, that you think
Right
are.
there in the Google Doc? Because
Yes.
when I read, we have to copy and paste the thesis.
Yeah, do you have questions about how to copy and paste the templates?
Because I looked at Lalo's, Gerardo's work, and he pasted the literature review, but they didn't paste the other one that you told us to
The
paste.
the template. Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, okay.
Okay, the idea here, in fact, Pilar did it. She did it, I think, the easiest way. Let me just show you here. So, okay, from this page, student thesis list, we have the template, and if you open up this template and click File, you have an option of making a copy. Now, this will make a copy directly to your own Google Drive. It'll just copy it as is, and this is the easiest way to do it because this document has headers, it has footers, it's all formatted.
Have to copy it in
So
format?
I think it's easier just to make a copy, just like I did here. File and make a copy, and then you can change the name of the document and move it wherever you want in your own document. But then you have to go back and share it again because you're creating a new document. Okay, but I think that's easier. Otherwise, if you copy and paste, you can copy and paste it like this, but you have to go back and add the header and the footer because the header and footer are separate.
The way I copied it was like,
And that's fine too. I mean, if you already have it just like this, and the formats are okay, then that's fine. Some of you are copying and pasting it over, and the formats are changing, and that's what I'd rather you not do, because the idea here is that you guys just start from this. Like, it's pretty much organized, and you just go in and start inserting information. So, however you want to do it is fine. But the idea is that you start with this, and then if you have a literature review from last semester, go ahead and add that here.
Okay.
Add your research questions at the end. So try to get your research questions directly from the conceptual question here. And you'll probably have anywhere from 2 to 4 research questions, right, that you want to focus on. Thinking, what are you going to examine in your unit of analysis? Try to keep that in mind whenever you develop your research questions. If we need to modify the research questions later on, that's fine. But I would like to see those now, even if you're not completely finished with the literature review, so I can kind of see where you're going and how you want to organize, or how you're organizing your literature review. Okay, so copy and paste what you already have. Start making the changes. Check under modules for week 2. I have a link that's called Forming an Argument, or Developing an Argument. And there's a lot of information here that I'd like all of you to look at as far as how you are organizing your literature review. So when I say forming an argument, what I'm talking about is how are you going to organize your information. And I talk very detailed here about different examples of how you can organize the logic of your argument. There's a video here that's kind of long, but it's well worth the time to look at, and it goes into detail about how to create an academic argument. So take a look at that. I talk about premises and types of claims, and it's just basically information about how you want to organize your work. So go ahead and move everything over and start making the changes. When you're ready for me to look at something or even a section of your literature review, just send me an email in Canvas and I'll look at it. But I would like that you add the research questions now so we can I can see kind of what the focus is according to this. And I'm also asking, I'm not sure if you had a chance yet to do this, basically moving this information from this handout, again going back to student thesis lists. Yeah, in fact you've already done it, no? See, yeah, you've already done it, right?
No, this is Lucía.
Okay, sorry.
So write down my
Lucía,
name.
where are you?
Write down my name.
You haven't added your name.
No.
Okay.
I know, yes, I have my name there.
Where's your name
It's
there?
Lucía Lopez. Write down Jimena.
Okay, yeah. All right, so just do like your classmates have done here, putting step 1, step 2, step 3, and basically moving this information here. Step 1 would be this, step 2, step 3, step 4, and moving that over here. Again, if something changes here, that's fine, but I'd like, this kind of helps me and should help you kind of see this is really the focus of your research, and then we have the link to the actual documents.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, I think that's basically it. I don't know if you have any questions or concerns at this point.
Well, if I have a question, I send you an email.
All right, and make sure that you have at least 3 primary research articles that really relate to your work. Now, they may be what you've already used, that's fine. But we need to have at least 3 primary research articles that are really similar studies to what you want to do. Okay, so just double check your lit review. If you have problems finding articles, let me know. We can look at that. So I'll give you this. This is yours.
For me too.
And if you don't have any more questions, I'll see you next week. And if you do have any questions or if you can't find articles or you're stumped and you feel like you can't make any progress, send me an email or come by and we'll talk about it. I don't want you to be like lost or anything for like a whole week. Right? So
Sure.
Alrighty.
Okay, so I look for you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you,
All right.
teacher.
You're welcome. See you later.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.